Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Eklund, bright and early here in California. I wanted to thank everyone who's watching us live this morning, and for those of you who are watching us after the fact, thanks for tuning in. I'm hoping to get a lot of your burning questions about Piano Pronto answered today, and I've been taking polls of questions both here on this event page and also in our Facebook group. So I'm going to try and get through as much as I possibly can this morning. So the first question I have is this. How Leonard, Alfred, Faber, Bastian, Thompson, Schaum, Piano Town, Succeeding at the Piano, and Suzuki seem to be some of the most popular piano methods besides Piano Pronto. Can you talk about what Piano Pronto offers that might encourage teachers to switch from the method they currently use to the materials you offer? So there's a few factors that are completely different with Piano Pronto. The first, and probably the biggest, is the fact that we are on the staff from day one. So there's no pre-reading, off-the-staff reading, no black key reading. We are just right on the staff from day one, from the first book. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my approach to note reading in a bit and tell you what my philosophy is and why it works to go ahead and start on the staff right away. The other main difference is a strong reliance on familiar and strong melodies. And I hear a lot from teachers that students no longer know a lot of folk songs, they don't know a lot of patriotic songs, a lot of classical melodies. But I don't see that as a reason to not be using these melodies. I feel like we need to maintain our heritage classics, our patriotic tunes, and we don't want all of these great canonic melodies from the classical, Western European art music, and even our own national folk tunes to die out. So why not study them and use them as a means to learning an instrument? So I often say that Piano Pronto relies on familiar tunes, and although these tunes may not be familiar to all, they are strong melodies. And by that I mean tunes that stick in your head. They've survived the test of time for a reason. So why focus on strong melodies? Well, it's easy. When students go home, if a melody has stuck in their head, they're more likely to feel confident when they go to the piano to practice on their own. Probably the hardest part about studying an instrument are the 6 days a week that you spend without your teacher or your cheerleader. We have to give students the tools to feel confident about what they're doing once they go home and are on their own. Okay, third point. There's a lot of value in these books. The Piano Pronto series is designed more or less as an all-in-one approach. You don't have 4 companion books that go with each level. At most, I would suggest 1 supplement book on the side, but that's mainly just to give your students a little taste of a different style of writing. So when I say it's an all-in-one approach, the theory, a lot of technical things are integrated into the series. That being said, the series is also very non-intrusive. So let's say you're a teacher who really likes to teach a lot of theory. Okay, Piano Pronto will give you a good basic foundation of theory, and the theory is integrated and correlated to the pieces that are introduced in the series. That's just the way my brain works. When I learn theory concepts, I need to see it applied, and this tends to work really well for students. But if you want to go further with theory, or if you do state testing for theory, absolutely use any of the wonderful series like Theory Time that are out there and that will augment the theory knowledge that your students are getting. Same thing in the realm of technique. If you're a big technique teacher, absolutely, Piano Pronto, nothing that you use on the side is going to get in the way. So if you like dozen a day, if you like finger power, hand in, whatever it might be, absolutely go ahead and supplement. I like to say too that Piano Pronto is a one-size-fits-most method. I don't have a separate series for young beginners. I don't have a separate series for teens. I don't have a separate series for adults, and that's on purpose. I wanted to write one really strong series that was both age and gender neutral. So the series will work just as well with a young student, a very young student, an adult, or a teen. Another thing that I've recently added, we have play-along tracks for the first 5 books in the series, and they're absolutely fantastic. You can access these play-along tracks either by purchasing them on the website, or you can access them for free through the Piano Maestro app, which is built by JoyTunes. It's available on the iPad only at this point, but it is entirely free for teachers and their students. All of the content, there are no restrictions. It's a fantastic app. Kids love it. They go home, they practice more. They practice their songs multiple times because it has that gaming element added into practice. So they can actually work on their Piano Pronto pieces with you in the lesson, and then they can go home, practice on their own, and work with their pieces in the Piano Maestro app, which is fantastic. I've also added teacher duet books for the first 3 books in the series, which are Keyboard Kickoff, Prelude, and Movement 1. These teacher duet books, you just need 1 per studio, and there are duet parts for every song in all 3 of those books. And these are not your typical duet parts. They're thoroughly contemporary and modern, and I don't mean in a dissonant sense. They are full of nice syncopated rhythms and sort of pop music stylings, so it really like dresses up the basic material that your beginners are playing, and it really just takes the sound to a whole new level. Finally, what sets us apart is, I would say, that the framework provided by Piano Pronto is super, super flexible, meaning that I'm not telling you how to teach your students. I'm just giving you a framework of great music, solid theory concepts that are related to the music, and allowing you to be the teacher that you want to be. So you can think of us as a tool in your toolbox, and you can use this music and adapt it to your own personal teaching style. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to question number 2. Can you go into more detail about the pedagogy behind Piano Pronto? I thought this was a great question. I actually have a bachelor's degree in piano performance with an emphasis on pedagogy. And then I have a master's degree in musicology, which I more or less just did for fun. I completed my performance degree back in 2001. And then I embarked on this journey of writing Piano Pronto. I can say that I didn't draw a lot from my personal pedagogy classes in school, and that the pedagogy behind Piano Pronto is kind of a 2-pronged thing. First of all, I started writing the series when I was living overseas in Sweden, and I was teaching a class full of preschoolers at an international preschool who all spoke different languages. And my boss wanted me to start teaching piano to these kids. So I didn't have access to any of the materials that I was used to using. So I bought a copy of Sibelius notation software, and I started writing because I needed material for my students. And that's really where the seed was planted. I started writing. I started to see what worked, what didn't work. And because we had sort of a communication barrier between me and these kids due to language issues, it was really interesting to see which melodies were well known, no matter what the cultural background was of the child, and which melodies worked and which ones didn't. So when I came back to the States, I still had this idea of writing a method in my mind, but the thought of actually going through with it was completely daunting and overwhelming. So basically, over a period of about 6 or 7 years, I was teaching full-time I was out of school at that point, and I just kept road testing materials on students from all walks of life. And I imagine that most of the students that I was teaching here in California are a lot like your average students that you have. So I just road tested, and if I found a piece that consistently wasn't working, out it went. And you could tell right away which pieces were working. So the series kind of gradually evolved just through my own teaching practice. And along the way, I was starting to write all of the text pages and put together the layout and see what worked with the majority of students. Again, I was looking for one size fits most. I don't believe that there's any one size fits all when it comes to method books. So that's a little bit about the pedagogy behind Piano Pronto. I myself, I grew up with John Sham and Thompson books, and I really liked them. They were certainly kind of dry on the visual appeal, but the music was great, and the music always kept me excited about piano. And also, the pacing was a bit faster than current methods are. And I feel like we've lost that a bit over the last 30 years. We've kind of transitioned from those older style, quick moving, quick paced methods, and we've kind of gradually dumbed things down to the point that I would get transfer students who had been, held off from learning eighth notes for 2 years. And that to me was it just didn't make sense to me. And I thought, well, there's no reason that students can't handle that. My students can handle that. I handled that, and I'm only 35, so I know when I was a kid, if I could handle those things, I don't think the intelligence level of children has dipped over the last 30 years, so why are we slowing things down so much? All right, so this kind of ties into the next question, and this was a great question that somebody asked me on Facebook. She said, what is your philosophy on learning note identification? Do you prefer a more natural approach or drilling note names alongside learning from the method book? For example, when would you have a student in Keyboard Kickoff memorize the note names? And that one word in her question, memorize, really got me thinking. For a while now, I've been telling people that my approach to note reading is what I would refer to as experiential. Basically, the way I was taught was I was just given lots and lots of music all the time. My teacher every week would throw new music up in front of me and say, okay, sight read it. And we would spend a good deal of time doing that. I became an excellent sight reader because I was just used to all types of music and just being able to read it very quickly. So as I was thinking about her question about memorizing note names, it dawned on me, no, this has absolutely nothing to do with memorizing. And again, like so many things with Piano Pronto, it's all tied back to my experience that I had living abroad in Sweden all those years ago. So I actually want to read you this response that I wrote up the other day because I don't think that I could say it better now on my own. So I say here, I get a lot of questions to the effect of how does Piano Pronto approach the process of learning to read music? I'm not one for labels, but I think I've come up with a good one that describes the approach to note reading, and it's this: total immersion. As you all know from using the materials, I don't talk about intervals, I don't talk about landmarks, anchor notes, and we don't rely on any sort of mnemonics, rhymes, or other tricks in order to remember notes. Music is a language, and I truly believe that beginners can start with a tiny vocabulary, 1 or 2 notes, displayed in their natural state on the staff, and build out their vocabulary from there. It's the same way we learn to read words on the page for the most part when we're kids. We see easy words, mom, dad, cat, dog, and gradually build our vocabulary and reading skills from there. Here's my problem with intervallic and landmark approaches. They add an extra step to the process of reading. First, a comparison of some sort has to happen, either comparing the distance from one note to the next note, or finding a landmark and looking for a relationship between our known landmark and where we actually need to be. And that's the first step. Then all of this information, and this is key, has to get decoded and placed onto the keyboard, making it essentially a two-step process to accomplish the goal of reading music. With the immersion approach, we are training early beginners to approach music reading just like we do as professionals and teachers. We see notes on the staff and instantly associate those notes with a location on the keyboard, one streamlined step. Sure, we can also see distances, but for us that doesn't complicate things because we are already literate. Plus, we don't use those associations as a means to an end. We just use it to make us even faster. So back to the idea of decoding things. I got to thinking about when I moved to Sweden and needed to learn Swedish in order to survive daily life. I had been to Sweden at least a dozen times before I moved there. I had heard the language a lot, so it wasn't totally foreign to me. But I tried studying and memorizing at home, and it just didn't get me very far. When I moved to Stockholm, one of the first things I did was take a 3-week-long immersion camp for foreign students. From the time I got there to the time I left, 21 days later, we heard and spoke only Swedish, total immersion at its best. By the end of those weeks, we were all fluent enough to be interviewed by a local radio station about the program and its successes, which is a pretty amazing feat. So what happened in those 3 weeks that was so much different from all my studying at home? Well, first off, I didn't have a choice but to use this new means of communication. In the beginning, we couldn't say much past daily conversational tidbits. Some of us had to see words in order to remember them, but gradually, the easy stuff, all that small vocabulary we had started with, started to stick, and we progressively grew the vocabulary. Here's the other really key factor that relates back to music reading. Within a week, we all gave up on the two-step process we were trying to survive with. When you first learn a language, if you're not totally immersed, you tend to always translate the foreign stuff back into your own native language and then decode it from there to formulate a response. That's slow and inefficient. By the end of our camp, we were all thinking in the new language, and that's the essential thing that needs to happen with students when they're learning to read music. They need to see it and then instantly associate what they're seeing onto the keyboard. I do the same thing as I approach rhythm. One of the things that surprises teachers in particular is that I approach eighth notes very early on in the series. That's because eighth notes aren't hard. We can teach them via syllables, via words, via copycatting. Again, it's all about seeing something visually on the page and internally knowing what it is. So just like my language camp, it's a struggle at first to totally immerse yourself in the new language, as it will be for new readers. But fluency comes quickly when you're streamlining the process. And the more songs you play, the less foreign the new language becomes. Because you're not constantly decoding things back and forth or simply memorizing, the language sticks. And then I wanted to add to that about the retention of the fluency. I do believe that if we're taught a language right the first time, immersion, daily usage, and practical experiential reinforcement, that it will stick. Memorizing and learning via tricks or memorization eventually leads to roadblocks. I still speak Swedish fluently, even though I never use it anymore. I read Swedish novels in my copious spare time, mostly when I'm on airplanes traveling for business. And it still baffles me that I remember a language that I never use anymore in daily life. The only thing I can attribute it to is that I learned it right the first time. We certainly never forget English once we've learned it. And I think reading music and retaining fluency with that is the same process. Sure, my Swedish vocabulary and my quickness probably isn't what it used to be, but it's still more intact than it ever was. And it's really fascinating to ponder this relationship between learning languages and learning to read music. So that, in essence, is the Piano Pronto approach to note reading. Total immersion. All right, so we'll go ahead and go on. The next question, how does Piano Pronto fit with other methods? As in, if I don't choose to throw out all of my shelves of other books and demand my students switch to Piano Pronto tomorrow, how can I add your music to my studio? So as I said earlier, I focused on making this the most unmethody method available. And by that, I mean that it's non-intrusive. Sure, it's a method, but it doesn't feel like a method. You could do a couple different things as a teacher. If you just wanted to kind of dip your toe in the pool and try out the method alongside another one, it's not going to get in the way. We have a free transfer guide on the website, and I'll show you a few of those website features in a bit. You can use that to kind of test your students. The transfer guide has excerpts from all of the books, and you put those examples in front of your student, have them read through it, and then on the following page will be suggestions as to which method level and which supplement books would be ideal for that student. So I would tell teachers, just start using one of the books alongside their current method. And what I want you to gauge mainly is I just want you to gauge the reaction. Kind of take note of which book they're practicing more out of, which songs they seem to be enjoying more. And that will usually give you your answer. I've had a lot of teachers tell me that, you know, eventually their students just start to forget to bring the other books, and that's kind of their universal sign that, hey, I'd like to switch what we're doing. And if you don't want to, use two methods in tandem like that, totally get it. We have lots and lots of supplement books on the site that I think your students would find really engaging. If you have students in the level 1B, 2 range, the Spotlight Solos books are great. They are fun, sort of pop music inspired solos that get a lot of great feedback about those books. For your rank beginners, my brand new Pronto Pizzazz book is getting really rave reviews all around. These are very easy solos with teacher duet accompaniments. And it's kind of a special book in that the solos stand alone. So your students won't feel bored when they go home and have to practice their part, because their part is still a complete song. But then you get the pizzazz when they come to their lesson and they play with you playing the duet part. They're just super fun solos in a variety of styles. So that's a great way to kind of dip your toe into the Pronto pool without, throwing out all those other books. With anything, I always tell teachers, it comes down to whatever works with each individual student. There's no one size fits all. And you got to do what you got to do. So just start experimenting. Just because you want to try something new doesn't mean that you were wrong about what you were doing before. I think all of us teachers, we tend to be rather stubborn and set in our ways. We get used to doing things a certain way, and we don't want to change that. And that's okay. I'm the same way, having taught for 20 years. I'm also resistant to change. So my goal as a writer and a publisher has really been to just give you as many options as I possibly can, so that you can find something with Piano Pronto that will work with almost all of your students, whether that's the method or one of the supplements. Okay, next question. Looking at the long term, what have you noticed personally, or as reported by other teachers, is the end result of students who graduate from the Piano Pronto method? Okay, so my answer might surprise you. Well, it might surprise you and it might not surprise you. Like most teachers, I usually find that ultimate jumping off point with any method book. I would say typically with my students, I would start jumping out of the method probably after movement 3, maybe after movement 4. Here's why. By the time they get to that point, they have learned a lot of different types of music in the method, and then hopefully through the supplements as well. By that point, they have a really good skill set. And even more importantly, if you've been using Pronto all the way up through movement 3, movement 4, these kids have been exposed to a lot of different types of music. So you as a teacher, because we're all great mind readers, you have a good sense of what works with this student, what they enjoy, and ultimately which road we should take for the future. And really that's the point of Piano Pronto. I want to give them a little taste of everything. So you as a teacher can see what road they're headed down, and then you can find other materials, to take them in their post-method book era. Now, that being said, that does not mean that Movement 5, Finale, and Encore are wasted books. Those books are really special in themselves because I think they're great sight reading books. Those books are especially great for adults who come to the piano and they show up on their second lesson and they're like, oh, I want to learn Clair de Lune, or I want to learn Moonlight Sonata. Well, there's a lot of really, really strong arrangements in Movement 5, Finale, and Encore. So again, because it's an unmethody method, there's nothing in those books that's going to, feel like you're in a method. They would really just work as great repertoire books for, your adult students who want to play all the famous classics, but maybe aren't quite up to the original versions yet. And on that point, I am very, very fussy as an arranger. One of the reasons I started arranging classical tunes is because I could never find arrangements that I thought did the pieces any justice. I have a couple criteria when I'm arranging. If a piece won't work in a simplified arrangement, I just don't arrange it. I figure there are some pieces that you need to wait until you get to the original, because if there's just no way to water it down. And if I can't do the piece justice, I won't do it. I try to maintain the integrity of the original version as much as I can. And I think that that's something that has really been accomplished in those later books in the Pronto series. So if you have a student that gets all the way through the series, that's great. But I found typically that after movement 3, movement 4, you have a good idea of what direction they want to go, and then you can kind of start to branch out from there. Now, do I hope that you branch out with more Piano Pronto supplements? Of course, but totally understand if you need to go the jazz direction, or let's say your student wants to play in a praise band at school, you're going to have to go on your way. But at least up through movement 3 and movement 4, you're going to give students a really, really fabulous foundation as far as reading and basic theory and basic technique. Okay, next question. Explain how you would conduct a first lesson with an adult or teenager who has already learned how to read music on another instrument, or had piano lessons a long time ago and did not retain much, and the challenges and progression patterns that are different than when beginning young children. All right, here's where the teacher duets come in really, really handy. If I were to get a new teen or adult student who had either had lessons or had learned another instrument, probably a treble instrument, I'm thinking of most transfers that came to me, had either played flute or clarinet or trumpet or something. So they had reading skills, but they had limited reading skills. I would probably use my studio copy of the Prelude book for the first lesson, and I would just make sure we played as much music as possible that first lesson. I'd sit down with the teacher duets with them, and we would just start from the beginning, and we would keep reading and keep reading and keep reading. I would ask them questions along the way. What's this? What's that? What does that mean? What's that sign right there? What does this mean? See how much they actually retained. It's really hard to tell in those pre-lesson interviews when they say, oh yeah, I know how to read music. It's better when we can actually assess those skills in an actual live setting. So I'd sit down and I'd start playing duets with them. And then when we got to our sticking point, I'd make a decision. So let's say they get, you know, halfway through the Prelude book, I'd still have them start in the Prelude book. What you can do with the first half of the Prelude book is go back and use those first songs as harmonization exercises. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then I just have them progress from there. Now, if they read through the entire Prelude book, great. Then you whip out your studio copy of Movement 1, get out those Movement 1 teacher duets, and start reading. Now, if you have a transfer student who comes to you who has, you know, skills, then I would suggest using the transfer guide in that first lesson. Maybe read through the Pronto pizzazz duets. Have them read through some of the spotlight solos so you can kind of get a feeling of where they are. As far as progression patterns, I don't find that adults progress that much differently than kids. They usually just have more excuses as to why they can't practice, and usually more excuses that are harder to argue with because, you know, they're adults. They have a life, and life happens sometimes. So I found that, you know, the only real difference is that the adults tend to ask more questions. Why are we doing it this way? Why don't we do it that way? So, and again, like everything in teaching, it's just taking it on a case-by-case basis. All right, this is a question I get nearly every day, so I'm going to address it right now. Does a keyboard kickoff student still need to go through the Prelude book, or can they skip to Movement 1? No, they can't skip Prelude. So let me explain this. When I first wrote Piano Pronto, Prelude was the first book, and for years it was that way. And then I found in my own teaching, and I was hearing from teachers too, that the Prelude book, the pace is pretty quick, which is great for older beginners. I would say 9 and above, but it's a little bit of a quick clip for younger kids who need a little bit of a slower progression. So last August, I whipped out the keyboard kickoff book. And it's a great place to start for young beginners. I would start kids who are, let's say, accelerated kindergartners or first graders. I would start them in keyboard kickoff. There's some great things in kickoff, mostly that we get them out of position-based thinking right away. We are learning note reading on the staff and using fingerings to be in alternate positionings and as a means of gaining mobility around the keyboard, which is fantastic. Which I would say if I had any criticism of my Prelude book, it would be that it probably stays a little bit too stuck in C position. That's why I urge teachers to use keyboard kickoff first in most cases, because it will start altering that thinking. Now that being said, there will be some young kids who aren't quite ready for, you know, shifting the hand up one step in order to accommodate the A in the treble clef. And if you have a student who just cannot wrap their brain around that yet, that's okay. Just modify it, give them some time, they'll get there. So again, we are giving you a framework, and you're going to need to adjust things on an individual basis, and that's okay. So back to the question. Once the students get through kickoff, I want you to remember that they've had the aid of note names almost all the way through. They do not have note names on repeated notes, which starts to develop the sense of tracking, all right? So even though they have the help of the note names, and this is mainly just to get them playing right away, they still have to notice on the note names that are not repeated if that note is moving, if it's going up, if it's going down, or if it's staying the same. So we are starting to build the tracking skills right away, even though they have the aid of the note names. And if note names and the note heads bug you, that's okay. You will not hurt my feelings. One thing that you can do is you can let the student read through the piece once, and then it can be a fun little game. You guys can start, you know, blacking out the note names little by little, and then eventually, you know, they're fluent. The keyboard kickoff book starts very slow with just one note introduced, and then 2 notes, and then 3 notes. So again, we start with that tiny vocabulary, totally immersing them in the language and building it out from there. So by the time they get to the end of kickoff, they have learned most of their treble notes from C up through A, and they've learned 2 harmonic intervals in the left hand, the open fifth and the harmonic second. And they've learned the A, reaching up to the A with the thumb. These songs are C position based, not middle C position based. So they cannot skip Prelude because Prelude does not have the note names in it. It's only the first 9 songs that have note names. And then the rest of Prelude does not have the aid of note names. So you can't skip right to movement 1 because it will be too much of a jump. So then I have teachers say, well, but what about those first songs in Prelude? Aren't we kind of wasting part of the book? No, you're absolutely not. When a student gets to the end of Kickoff, you can assess, how successfully they got to the end of Kickoff. If they are just absolutely thriving and, smooth sailing, conditions are perfect, great. I have in the note to teachers in the Kickoff book, what I want you to do is to start at Brother John in the Prelude book, which is about a quarter of the way through the book. I want you to start there and then progress. Okay, so what about the first songs? What I want you to do with those first songs that are right hand only songs is I want you to go ahead and use those as little harmonization composition exercises. So you can have your students use those harmonic intervals that they've learned in Kickoff and the ones that they're learning in the Prelude book and go ahead and jot them into those first few songs that are with the right hand only. And then they'll have nice full pieces. So you're not wasting those songs. Now, another thing that I'm hearing quite often is that teachers are using Kickoff and Prelude in tandem together, which I think is fantastic. Because in these early stages, when we are gaining literacy with reading music, it is all about experience and a lot of it. One of the great values in the Piano Pronto series is that the books are packed full of music. And there's a reason for that, because the more music they read, the more fluent they become quicker. So what you can do is you can use the pieces in Kickoff and Prelude that are kind of at the same level. Now, eventually, Prelude is going to start to move too quickly, and then you'll just need to kind of default back to Kickoff and go ahead and finish it. And then you can come back into Prelude and go ahead and finish the book out. Other reasons you can't just move to movement 1 is that there's a ton of things introduced in Prelude that are not in Kickoff, including a wide array of harmonic intervals in the left hand, and so they would miss out on all of those. The introduction of dynamics, the introduction of measure numbers, the introduction of sharps, flats, naturals. So you absolutely cannot skip Prelude, and I hope that that kind of clears up that whole situation. I realize that can be a bit confusing, but I wanted an option available for our younger students so that they could get into Pronto right away and not have to wait until they were ready for the Prelude book. Okay, so then this comes up to a question about siblings. Somebody asks, what are your thoughts and suggestions on putting siblings in the same lesson books when both siblings are at the same level? Okay, that's a tough question. I've had it happen in a couple cases where 2 students were siblings and both came in at a level 1B, let's say. I'd say you can try and put them in the same book, but don't have them share a book. They need to be able to write in their own book. If there's a lot of sibling rivalry, that's probably not going to work. So you probably need to divide them up. But if you have a situation where you have a much older sibling and then a younger sibling, let's say there's an age split of, 3 or 4 years, that's pretty significant. I would probably, as soon as possible, try and pull the older one out of methods altogether. Part of the reason that I created the Songs I Love to Play books, there's 2 of these. There's volume 1 and the blue book, which is volume 2. These are the favorite pieces out of the Piano Pronto series in slightly beefed up arrangements, a little bit more recital ready. Minus all the methody stuff. So that's one way you could get 2 siblings essentially working in Piano Pronto, but the older sibling kind of gets the grown-up version book. you as a teacher can still apply all of the same, you know, asking theory questions, all the same sort of stuff that happens in the Piano Pronto method book, and just apply those ideas to the Songs I Love to Play book. So that's one solution, but definitely a tough situation. I've had it happen where a younger sibling starts to overtake the older one, and that can just be a whole host of problems. So you want to keep the peace in a family. So, you know, as with everything, we have to be flexible as teachers. So those are my ideas about that. Okay, moving on. I have noticed with your latest tutorial videos, you encourage teachers to teach students to improvise and add dimension to what is written. That would include chords, arpeggiated, broken block, etc. So one of the goals with Piano Pronto is really to create independent thinkers. As a teacher, my goal was to make my students independent of me. I wanted them to be able to be great musicians on their own. And part of developing that sense of musicality is by not telling them what to do all the time. So you will notice, especially in my supplemental materials, that I am often very thin on the dynamic suggestions. Fingerings is definitely something all the way through the catalog. I'm very selective about what fingerings I put into pieces because I don't want students to need us so much. I want them to be independent thinkers who can come up with ideas about how to put more expressivity into the music. So some of the tutorial videos that I'm going to be doing explain how to take some of the basic pieces that I have and how to make them fancier. That's one thing that my teacher always made me do. She used to say, okay, fake it. So she'd put something new up in front of me that I was going to be sight reading, and maybe it would be something really easy, much easier than my current level, and she'd say, okay, make it fancy. So stay tuned for a lot of those like upcoming tutorials where I talk about what I would call structured improvisation, where I give students ideas about how to take the materials and yeah, just jazz them up and make them fancier. All right, this is a funny one. I get asked a lot, how do I get the book to lie flat? So we're gonna have a little binding 101 talk. Last summer, I rebound all of the method books for a lot of reasons, mostly for my own sanity, because we've just gotten too busy to be comb binding things. And frankly, I was just tired of those bindings. They were hard to ship. The pages would get tangled. It was just kind of a mess. So we have moved into what's called a perfect bind, which are these glue-bound spines. So if you just, this is a brand new Prelude book, by the way. Yes, if you just open it, it's not going to lie flat. But I paid extra money to have super, super strong glue. This binding is not going to break. All you need to do is give it a good fold, just like we're all used to doing with all of our books. Give it a good fold, and it will lay nice and flat on your music stand. And yes, you might have to do this a couple times in a couple locations, but eventually the book starts to behave, and it's fine. You're not going to hurt it. These pages are not going to pop out, and it's going to lie ultra flat on the music stand. This is something that I really researched before changing the bindings. In binding of books, you don't have all that many options. The Piano Pronto books, another source of value is they're super thick. Our shortest book is over 80 pages. When you get up into page counts that high, you do not have a lot of options when it comes to binding, and I will not spiral bind or comb bind ever again. It's not cost effective, and eventually those pages get tangled as well. The perfect bind is really, really nice. So since the books are so thick, this is what we ended up with. All of the smaller supplemental books, you see the staples there on the side. So this is what they call saddle stitch. You can do this for books up to 64 pages, which is a good deal of our supplement books. And you know, these two you can bend, and that will lie super flat. So thin books, you will see the saddle stitch, and on the method books, you just need to convince them a little bit, but they will lie nice and flat. You do not need to worry about breaking the binding. This glue is incredibly strong. I road tested them over and over again before giving the go. All right. Doing pretty good here. Okay. Will I ever be able to get your music or your books at my local music store? Absolutely. Yes. All you need to do is go in and talk to your store owner. You can give them my email address, and I'll send them my dealer terms, and we'll get them set up with the ordering from Piano Pronto. I have no problem working with retailers. Always glad to do it. I'm just pretty busy these days, so I'm not actively, chasing down retailers on my own. So yes, absolutely, feel free to give them my information. As far as Canadian distribution goes, Canadian and EU distribution is a little tricky for us, but we're looking into it. For international customers, I recommend that you shoot me an email if you're interested in ordering. I've got some special perks for international customers. We're doing the best we can right now. The problem with the distributing is that retailers up in Canada or down in Australia, they're going to mark up the prices of the books anyways because they have to make up for their shipping costs. So it's a tricky situation that we're currently investigating all of our options. But for right now, we've got the absolute best shipping costs that we can get. And if you are ever overcharged on shipping, I always refund the difference back to the customer. I'm uber honest about everything. So like I said, shoot me an email before you order and I can give you exact shipping costs. Okay, where can I find what the specials are? So now we're going to have a little adventure with screen sharing. So I thought we can just show you a couple things on the website. So let's try this out. All right. Oh my, okay. Let's see. No, I don't think that's what I wanted to do. Let's see. Okay. There we go. But I am not sure that that is actually screen sharing. Okay, I think we are going to hold off on that. And there we go. Okay, sorry about that. I thought I knew how to do that, and I guess that I don't. So I will practice that this week, and probably the next broadcast is going to be a walk through the website, so we can go through all of the features. But I can answer the question about where to find the specials. There is a link on the main menu bar on the website that says Deals of the Week. And that is where you will find all of our special fire sales. And I've been doing a lot of like package deals. There's a great one right now called the Super Supplements Pack. That's 6 of our most popular supplement books all put into one package. I think it's like 35% off retail. The Teacher Starter Pack is still a great deal. It's about 42% off of retail pricing. It's all 13 books in the series, including all 3 of the Teacher Duet books. So definitely great for having that studio copy in your library. Another place that you can find the deals, when you first come to the website, when you just type in pianopronto.com, you're going to see the opening page, and there's always a slideshow there where I've always got the most current deals and the most current new offerings that are being displayed right there in that slideshow. So when you first come to the site, you might like to just go ahead and sit there for a moment and watch those slides roll by. If you click on one of those slides, it will actually take you to the product page. All right, are there any exciting additions to Piano Pronto in the works that you can tell us about? More composer books, etc. This is 2015 is kind of the year of the reprint, I guess you could say. We are busy sort of making some very modest like layout changes to the method books themselves, because most of them are coming up for reprint already, which makes us very happy. So we are kind of reformatting things to look more like the Keyboard Kickoff book, which is the most recent book. Super clean layout, very nice to look at. So that's what we're doing. We are in some of the later books sort of compressing the engraving a bit so that some of those really long songs are a little less long and condensed onto fewer pages. So just slight changes with the engraving. That obviously is a huge project. We also just signed a deal with a web development company, and we are going to be completely redoing the website. It's going to be very similar to the current website, but we are moving on to a different platform away from WordPress that is just focused on e-commerce sites. So it's going to be a super robust platform that's going to grow with us over the next 5 years. So I'm super excited to have kind of like taken my IT hat off for a while, and I'm kind of handing that project over to someone else. We're going to be improving the sheet music viewing on the site, and lots of little changes. On the music front, it's my hope, knock on wood, that Spotlight Solos Volume 3 is going to come out this year. I'm 2 songs in, so probably 10 more to go. I would really love to write a follow-up to Pronto Pizzazz because the feedback has been so great. I think there's a great need in the marketplace for very easy solos with engaging duet parts. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of pizzazzed recitals this spring utilizing those pieces. Other than that, I get asked a lot about hymn arrangements. It is something that's on the roadmap. It's up there on the priority list. I'll get there. And the other thing I really want to finish this year is the Dreamweaver book, which is kind of the follow-up of the New Horizons book. I've been working on this book forever. I just need to finish it. It's going to feature some harder versions of some of the favorites in my catalog, like The Return, Sky's the Limit, and it's got a bunch of new pieces in it as well. So I've probably got 4 or 5 more songs to write before that book comes out, but I'm hoping maybe this summer. For the holidays this year, I would love to get a Christmas duet book together, maybe of equal levels on the 2 parts. We have Christmas for 2 already, which is fantastic. It's kind of like Pronto Pizzazz, very easy primo parts, and really dressed up, fun teacher parts. I will say this about the teacher parts. They're written in a totally selfish way. I used to hate playing duet parts from method books because I just found them to be like boring polka parts that I could just fall asleep while playing them. So when I embarked on this journey of starting to write duets, and particularly writing teacher duets to accompany these easy solos, I wanted to make sure that you as the teacher was having fun too. So it's funny, I get a lot of messages from teachers that they actually enjoy just playing the duet parts on their own because they're pretty. So I don't think that duet parts should ever just be there to support. I think that they can be pretty and lyrical and melodic as well. So that's kind of what's on the horizon. I'm kind of flirting with the idea of an accompanying technique book to go with the first 3 books in the series, but that's kind of just a very light idea. In the future, I am thinking about maybe just having a book that has some basic technical exercises that actually relate directly to the pieces in the Piano Pronto series. So it would be tied to the method. I'm just thinking about all of the exercises that I can't cram into the method books, like the parts of those Pronto prep sections in the series. So that is kind of an idea I'm batting around, and I'd love to hear feedback about that idea, which I'm sure I will. Speaking of feedback, if you want to connect with us on Facebook, we have a very lively and boisterous group on Facebook. It is Piano Pronto Publishing. You can just search for that and our forum will come up. We have about 1,500 members and growing all the time, and it really is the quickest way to get an answer from me. Some would say I live on the internet. I feel like I kind of do these days, but I love interacting with my customers because it is the way that I will continue to build a strong catalog of works that are filling the needs of the marketplace, which was the whole point of Piano Pronto in the first place. I felt like there was a need for some fresh music, and there was a need for, songs that weren't found in every other method book series. One important thing that I did with the series was that I included arrangements of pieces that are outside the piano world. I want kids to know the names and the melodies of famous symphonic themes or opera themes or show tunes. I think that this is an important facet of their music education. All right, I have 3 minutes to answer these last 3 questions. No, 2 questions only. Okay, my high school students and adult students love your pop-inspired tunes. Would you consider offering some of them in more difficult keys in the future? Yes, yes, and yes. I just released a song yesterday called Midnight Waltz. It's a solo version of one of my duets that I wrote last year. And it's in a key that I have not explored very much in the catalog. So absolutely, I will continue to kind of grow the selections. All right. And the last question was, what inspired you to start writing pop-inspired tunes? Well, it was my students. Like everything I do, everything has been based on a need. Somebody in my studio needed something. They needed to perfect some sort of technique. They were struggling with something, so I would write something to fit that need. Well, my students, they really loved playing pop music, and I do too. But it's difficult to secure licensing to sell pop arrangements, extremely difficult. So I decided to stop fussing with licensing and just decided to start writing my own pop-inspired tunes. So I take a lot of the elements of pop music that people are listening to these days, and I infuse them into a pedagogically sound format. So it's great because students feel like they're playing music that's modern and relevant to them. And teachers are happy because, well, it's a teacher who wrote the piece. So there is always a lot of concepts to talk about with rhythm, with expressivity. So again, we give you the framework and allow you to be the teacher that you need to be. All right, so I think I actually managed to get through everything, and I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I hope that this was an informative session for you. And if you have other questions about Piano Pronto, I imagine we will be doing more of these broadcasts, especially ones where I learn actually how to screen share. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.